how you respond, what you're required to do, etc., and be concerned with that. In addition to that, I think we've all kind of voiced that what are the checks and balances? We don't know what those are, and they appearing publicly available. You know, an investigation and things of that nature, that's one thing, its own set of rules, but also how we respond to certain things that includes subpoenas and other things, how we do that is very important. And knowing what those rules and regulations are, everybody should be crystal clear on those. And then I think there's been some concerns about the methods and the apparent lack of oversight from the board. I think that's kind of even evident in some of the changes from the board and some of the recent resignations that I was going to keep later in the presentation. One thing, just kind of highlighting some of these questions. Now, again, some of this information is dated because we've been kind of working through the legislation with the council, with OIT, with the ethics office, with the administration and others for well over about, I'll call it 3 months now. Developed, introduced, and now they're just some back and forth. So, questions around lack of clear and operating procedures, operating the city's code and activities, employees, whether they're employees, whether they're witnesses or subject to investigation. That's the variety. And you listed those here, and then some of those questions that I think would be helpful. You know, should target be told their status as a witness, subject, or target? While the administration believes yes, we kind of came to an agreement through the legislative process and an answer to that, you know. So I've heard a bunch of different things. All these people they know, all the staff is getting everything as a response. That's one of them, but big one that we didn't. These employees, while they aren't extraordinarily happy about it, they are happy about the question that they talked about it, and even take it through an appropriate process and we're looking forward. This provides witnesses legal representation for you if they're not represented by a union. So that question, the answer has been resolved. Yes. The other question that has been resolved is because the charter says that they employees should have representation, can they? The answer to that is also yes, because we have an MOU that says so. One of the questions that still remains that the OIG says that it should be with the lawyer, while the charter does not require that. Because I know the unions don't have just a ton of lawyers around there represented by like folks. I'll quickly, if you don't mind, you can just go through these and I'll just highlight key things that you can look for. Again, publicly available, provided to you. Just highlighting when you look at the charter and you ask these questions, we just put a very simple, easy to read look. But there's not really a ton of changes in the legislation like you might want, like you might think. Key things are now instead of having one board that was created about 20 years ago and only focused on ethics, now you have 2 boards. One with the expertise to be able to really provide the services necessary to the OIG, and another one that will do the same for ethics because they do have very different charges, and so having that expertise is important. I will start to be just tell you what to look at. Again, a summary of the legislation, even included all of the recent changes. So one, should an interviewee be informed of the status, et cetera, it's now just being made optional. So it's actually at the head of the OIG to make that decision. That's kind of the compromise that the legislation offers to keep going. Again, this is just a summary of the legislation. This is current form. This is as of 2/15/2025. So these are just some major changes. But it just highlights that, again, governing board and how you might influence in the process. There is one slide that I do want to highlight that is important. And I know I see Mr. Martin here, and I'll thank him here shortly. But one thing that, you know, is really important is the administration of subpoenas, because that is just vital, because that is determined on how we actually abide by and align with employee rights. And it's really one of the reasons why we brought the legislation forward. What we have discovered at this point, we didn't know, but that the subpoenas were not being issued in alignment with state law, which is a huge issue and a lot of liability not for the mayor's office, not for the OIG, but for the city as a whole. You can go to the next slide. So as you know, one thing we highlighted in yellow, go back and look at these, because I don't want to go over my time much, which I've already done, but one thing that is office is responsible for is hearing all federal, state, and local law. You can go to the next slide. You know, thanks to Mr. Martin and his open records request, one of the things that we learned because we couldn't get access to a lot of the data is that there were over 62 subpoenas that were issued, which we did not have any idea about, that, you know, really requested some financial as well as telecommunications records from employees, private citizens, and others, which is unique because you're not able to really access those things or should not be able to without at least some notice to the person. You go to the, when, you know, what we found is that there has been unlawfully done, and those questions and concerns brought forward by our employees have quite a bit of validity to it. To the OIG's office credit, they did highlight that they own their missteps, although the liability for those missteps now rests on the city, and it is a humongous concern for us because we have still been waiting to get all of the subpoenas, at least 11, which have been issued and have not been provided. Once a subpoena is provided, it is public records that should be given and turned over. So there's some concerns on that piece and maybe some reverse instruction. Go to the next slide. And so just highlighting, we've included the state laws, just to make it very clear so people can understand and see it, not something that's made up and created. But we believe some of these changes in the legislation will correct these practices and help us all get on the right page for ensuring that we deliver the government appropriately. You go to the next slide. I'll stop explaining the slides. I'll just, because I know there's a time constraint or whatnot, I'll just tell you these, because there's something that folks had questioned, you know, did people really go to folks' houses, you know, and because they were working from home and things of that nature. But this video is live, so yes, they did, and that's a complaint from the employee saying that somebody went to their home instead of questioning them on site. You go to the next slide. This is just that video, so you can play it later. Go to the next slide. They're also, you know, want to make sure that this critical concern about devices between private and your work device, two different things, and you have to go through a process to do that. It's included in the legislation. Go to the next slide. Same thing here. I think what we're really talking about in some instances is around jurisdiction. And I think having the two boards and those processes together with two great leaders at both the Office of the Inspector General and the Ethics Office, you have, you know, leadership there, but they just need to be able to call all the strikes with a nice little baseball field and whatnot. But in general, for them to just understand jurisdiction. So the ethics looks at one thing, the OIG looks at another. So making sure that those things are in place is just really important so that we understand how we respond and align with each. So that has been an issue of folks down planning. So still not an issue from us, but definitely an issue that those offices have spread. Go to the next slide. Looking at their different approaches, I think that is key because one thing, and I'll close with this, is we are, go to the next slide. One thing that we are really, really focused on is making sure that we maintain the public trust. It's very important. You know, people have to understand that they have others that will respond to the business. And but I'll tell you, I'm always kind of pushing and punching on government maybe more than I should. The person works in government, but when we don't get it right, it causes big problems. If we're not serving the public, if we're not held to a higher standard, then it creates challenges all around the business. So I know there's questions about whether they aren't really spotting, how do you do so and all of that. But definitely spot in with purchase about 15 of them, and they've done a lot of explanations, but there is no reason whatsoever to have such things for an administrative type of interview. And in Georgia, where you, at least in the city of Atlanta, where yeah, you can record somebody, they're supposed to let them know you're being recorded. Just leaving a recording device somewhere is more like traffic is, of activities. They focus on the line. You've also unique purchases. Here's a gun vest and gun holsters, those things. A little bit out of pocket for an administrative type of activity and operations. I think just kind of highlighting that we have got to have guardrails that people understand what type of business they're supposed to be doing. Because I know that the board and others are not very much aware that these types of things are happening. So you go to the next slide. Even when it comes to when I talk about the public trust, that's very important. And so no issue in, publicizing the challenges or.
Mr. Donald, we're gonna move on to the question and answer session because I know our conversation was supposed to be about the charter.
Yeah, and all of these relate to it, but yes, so we can move on to any questions that you have.
So, Mr. Martin, he was called out specifically.
Yeah, that was actually Mr. Martin.
I'll give you opportunity.
It might explain why it was that in legislation was introduced, limiting the subpoena powers of OIG for the first request for information about subpoenas from OIG was made.
Yeah, so it's not just about subpoena power.
I understand it's not just about,
I'm trying to.
but it is about.
No, it's not just. So the legislation is not just about subpoena power. The legislation is about the holistic layout of ethical government. Subpoena powers is one piece. And again, we believe from hearing from employers, and thanks to you, those beliefs were actually proven true. But we believe that the Office of the Inspector General was inappropriate with actually accessing records and not providing notice. So that's one reason. The other reason is that there has to be some type of standard operating procedure for how these offices will actually conduct investigations and all of the ancillary activities. The third thing behind that is also around jurisdiction. You can look at the sinking ball, which is an example that's included here in the presentation, which you guys will have, where you have two different offices weighing in differently on one topic, but it's actually an ethics issue versus one of the ways.
Back to the screen, that's the questions to be answered.
And the attack on the public trust is something that's concerning. So there are actually about 8 different issues related to that I've included in the presentation. But when you look at the legislation, it now addresses them all. So it wasn't done just on subpoena power. The subpoena power was a part of it. And thank you very much for your open record request. And it really helped to really solidify some of these concerns that we have.
And in fact, OIG's response to that was to correct the errors.
I don't think that I would agree with that. I think the OIG definitely said that it only was a step. But as this unfolds a little bit, what you'll see is, and what the question that we might ask is, how intentional was that? And then what is the process for correcting it? So one of the processes was to do something that we asked about before. It was to make those, the policies and procedures public. And so that did happen in January. It also did not go to a vote. So let's think about that. I don't have to take my policies and procedures to the board to make them official, and I do that on Tuesday. What stops me on Thursday from representing those and changing? But also means that they're right, or have they been evaluated by a group that is put together in a format with the expertise to be able to evaluate if they match the requirements of state, federal, and local law. So I think the intent may have been there to correct those issues, and that did occur after it was brought forward. But when we talk about the liability that comes with it, it's not that simple.
In this case, it's not subject to judicial review.
No, you can actually issue a administrative subpoena and received that information without judicial review. Now you can, but the legislation proposes something different, which is in alignment with what your,
Are they not like definition subject to retroactive judicial
no, sir.
opinions to be updated?
We don't allow them, we allow them with state, with local, state, and federal law. I saw there were some more questions, we're happy to take those.
I just want to make statements. One of the board members, the inspector general, we at our special call board meeting had the chance to, I guess, get some color on some of the development that happened. And I think what everybody thinks, but I think this you put it to color the rest of the conversation. And that is the inspector general is not independent. The board is independent, and the inspector general reports to the board. The inspector general is accountable to the board. And to this time, I believe we've only really been hearing from one party that's affected by the legislation. And in fact, there are 5 parties. There's the inspector general office, the administration, the board, and then the actual vendors that are being investigated. And there's currently pending lawsuits that alleges that Georgia law was not followed, broken the issuance of administrative subpoenas. And stop me if it's a pending lawsuit. However, the subpoenas were sent to financial institutions with language added to them, so to not disclose to the state. You cannot, under Georgia law and under the charter, go to someone's financial institution and request their personal financial information without telling them you're requesting that information. And the way that I'm, in retrospect, understanding the charter is the process for these administrative is to one, you actually request the information directly from the individual. The individual does not comply, issue the administrative subpoena, and at the same time, submit that to a judge. And at the same time, if the individual does not respond to the subpoena, then you can go to the judge. However, after that subpoena issue, it immediately goes to the board, the ability to quash that subpoena. That's the way I understand it. And now it seems like none of these have been followed. Not only are these not been followed, but the board has not been engaged. And as the independent overseeing entity, we're the ones who should have been responsible, who should have been overseeing this. And I think what we've been hearing is interference with investigations. We notified because it was compromising investigation. Well, that might be the case. However, you still have to follow the Georgia law, and you still have to follow the charter. Similar to the ACRB, there are laws, rules in place.
So I think my follow-up to that is, as a result, didn't the board vote that the IG should have independent counsel as a result of that, for that very reason, because a lot of this has been presented in this particular role, and it's provided that oversight that help with the oversight that the board of the OIG needed.
Correct. And
A little bit of insight to that.
That's in alignment with what a bar request.
No, not necessarily. So I think you mentioned something that was, so the board is independent. The functions are independent. They don't report up through the administration or necessarily the council, but it is a part of the government. And so the liability rests with the government. And so there's no quote unquote independent council. The council is the city attorney. It's the same way that the city attorney represents the administration and the city attorney represents the council. And it does so for all of the other boards. You would go out and get outside counsel and do all of those things. But even how you get the independent counsel draws things into question. So yeah, also the charter is clear. The independent counsel has to be brought in based on a conflict, a conflict that has been identified, and it is not to represent, it is to advise. Those are very different things. And so it is not necessarily resolved. The board is taking action, but that action has to now be, and they took that action outside of the auspices of the city attorney. So I would not want to give you a false perception that, oh, well, we just went and got outside counsel, because you don't have the authority to necessarily do that. So there's a much, I think, the fine lines that were highlighted on even Georgia law that Mr. Taylor so eloquently just highlighted, that it's like, wow, didn't know this. We weren't under that understanding. We're the board. How do we resolve this? And, the steps that they've taken. Don't think that those steps around the independent counsel resolve the issue, or if they're even going to be deemed lawful. I think that action was taken, and ironically and uniquely and surprisingly, you had 3 board members resign that day or the next day after they made the action. So I think it'll be unique on how we look at that and what the results are. I wanted to make sure to provide that coverage.
I understand, and I think in my opinion, and inherently, there's a conflict that Mr. Free has with Inspector General that has an open investigations. So at that point, there should be independent counsel for that advice, as you said, if you're not saying representation, and I think that should be reflected in the charter amendment that should, and that there should also be budgetary resources provided to that. Yes, Dr. Stout? Dr. Stout?
Dr. Stout,
Dr. Stout?
she can't raise her voice too much.
Yes, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, no.
Mr.
Hi, Rebecca Kane, FPUB. I wanted to ask, you mentioned expertise. Who's the arbiter of whom has the expertise? And how does this align with the Association of the Office of Inspector General? Because, I mean, I hear what you're saying, I see the differences, but I look to those associations to help be the neutral body, if you will. And again, who will be the arbiter?
No, this is first excellent question. So in Atlanta, the arbiter is the council. So every organization, there are 14 offices of inspector generals. 14, and all of them are different, and the only that are even remotely similar is the city of Atlanta and the one that's in Louisiana. I forgot the actual, the parish. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but it's the parish in Louisiana. And so all of the others are different. And so the first arbiter, I would say, is the charter, because that is our rules and regulations that we all align and abide by. But we have heard from the Office of Inspector General, Association of Inspector General, I don't know if you saw the work session, but the gentleman said, and I thought I took it as a compliment, that is me and him in the room for 3 hours, probably solve all this stuff pretty easily. Awesome, thankful for that perspective. But what I would also say is that office is important, and it's a good one, and the feedback that they've given has been awesome. But there's also some nuance there. That is a group that is focused on the role of Inspector General. What actually oversee inspector general, making sure that they're included in the conversations as well. Because Atlanta has a very unique piece. We're not like the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia, appointed by the governor and it rolls up through the executive office. Actually, the other 12 are made like that. Decided to do something different. And what we have done is put folks like the council in place to be able to, in other words, call balls and strikes, manage the entire process, and then create a board as well as these two offices. So that is one great group, and they are a part of the subject matter expertise. But we've also brought in other people who are, I'd say, equally as effective and well-known subject matter experts who contribute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that word.
Yours, two quick questions. As alluded to earlier, the ACRP has subpoena power. None of these issues have been. Secondly, what was the rationale underlying wanting to particularly the APAB members for being on the OIG's office, as well as a third? What was the rationale for leaving at city council and there had no conflict with this in place?
Got 3 questions. I'm trying to remember them all and very quickly on that. The first one, wow, I dropped it already.
ACRB, system powers,
Very, I'm so glad you asked that. I actually just learned it. I probably shouldn't say that. I should have known this probably a while ago. But with ACRB, even their process is a little bit different. They get all, so one, you asked about this powers. What is unique? They have subpoena powers, the council has subpoena powers, the mayor has subpoena powers, and so does the OIG and ethics. Many of you probably didn't even know that. That's something that I didn't know. But, you know, so yes, those problems have not come up. Part of the reason they haven't come up is because folks have been in alignment with local, state, and federal law. And so that's, when you ask why didn't the problem come up, is because they didn't adhere to the law. The second piece about the ACR, the Atlanta Citizens Review Board, that is unique is that when you look at the ACRB and the reason they don't have issues in transmitting documents and things of that nature is because there is a process and a procedure that they go by that makes it to where they don't have to do that. So if they're investigating something, it's already gone through it's been investigated by the group that's at APB that does those internal investigations. It has been closed. And then when they come in and do their review, they take all of those documents and hand them over from their internal investigation. So there is those things are already completed and done. So when they hand it over, they get the complete package. They're not actually investigating while the other investigation is going on. Is that clear? So it's already a closed matter on that end. So now you can take all of those documents and hand them over to them. If they had an issue with getting those documents, they would then enact their subpoena powers. So that's question number 1. And I apologize, you had 2 more, and I want to make sure I get it.
rationale behind your assertion that to remove APAB members from the OIG.
Well, I'm just saying my assertion.
No, your department, whoever you represent, not
I represent the mayor's office.
not a personal you, it is your entity.
I still think that would be an assumption. So if you look at the overall look at the legislation, and I think it's important to make that clear that I wouldn't being a smarty pants or anything like that, just being clear about it. So when you look at how boards and commissions are done around the city, and that's part of my job, we come to a point though. You have certain groups that have certain levels of expertise that are included or not. If citizen engagement has to be done. Those 7 groups are, I'll tell you, I don't think it really makes much of a never mind about. But it does have to have citizen engagement. When we start looking at the ethics office and the OIG in particular, right? Just like you would with the ACRB, you have to have a certain level of expertise. I don't know about you guys, but I'd imagine looking at this group, maybe 25, I don't know how many around the table, but how many would have, investigatory experience to the level that you would be able to oversee an office that only does investigation? I don't know the answer to that, but I'd imagine that it's not 80% of the.
I disagree, sir. I think it's probably 80% of us that are being, members do not have the investigatory
I'm
knowledge.
just making this, just let me, I promise you, let me cook. You'll have a meal, I promise you, but just let me cook for a second.
We might not need it.
It's not so 80%, right? And so maybe it is ensuring that the makeup, because I think that's some of the things that we've heard from the board. The board has come forward and said, hey, we need this, we want this resource. Like, we're not able to call, I saw a video floating where the former chair just stepped down, said, hey, I said way back in 2015, we need guardrails, and we aren't equipped to put them there. So I'm assuming that the folks who are putting those things together look at it and say, okay, well, we've got to mess with the composition of this, and if the board is not equipped to put those guardrails in as constructed, let's change the construction to make sure that they have the expertise to be able to do that, as well as adjust the legislation. Now, they may have made, when that group determines that they good or bad decision of not including APAB initially, but I think now they've corrected it. And that's something that's important about the legislative process. Legislation is never perfect when it's created. The ethics office, which is renowned around the country, has been around for 20 plus years. This will be their 7th change. Still not going to be perfect. It's going to be much better. This will be the first one for the OIG's office. But there'll need to be more. But even the process, I just showed you a presentation. I had to put dates in there because there have been 6 changes to the legislation to get it to where it is now, where it's pretty palatable by everyone, and everyone believes we have a pretty good product for the most part. But it didn't start off that way. You believe that the omission of APAB was one of those mistakes? Probably was, but it's been fixed now. Third question, I apologize. I
Don't
didn't.
worry, you've answered them all.
Okay, thank you.
That's one of the, it's a part of it.
Councilor Ingham, APAB wrote a letter to the task force and council and the mayor back in August of last year. After which like original thing was to us, and relate to us, actually relate to our board and issued their annual reports about the poor response rate of departments to their recommendations. I was just checking on the OIG's website. There's 61 recommendations that haven't even been accepted by departments, some dating back to 2023, which represents about 71% of recommendations. That is not addressed in the legislation, and I'm curious if the administration favor putting something in legislation related to it, or if the administration really hasn't addressed these issues. They're still not even accepted as perceived acknowledgement of that recommendation.
Yes, I don't think the receipt of recommendations may not be fully accurate. We have gone back and done that. As a matter of fact, when we received back in, it may have been around December, the OIG gave us a listing of some of those, and there has been some correspondence during that time. But I don't know if that number is correct or has been updated on the site. But I'll check into that for you. I don't think that it would be appropriate to place it in the legislation. I think our SOPs, which you'll see an update to those coming out as well, and administrative guidance that we're going to provide when the legislation is adjusted, finalized, et cetera, we'll address those. So you'll see that.
So in those SOPs, you can't have one it will state related to response time.
We didn't get it, but it will stay.
Well, you don't have the SOPs yet, but can you give us some guidance as to?
Yeah, but you can look at, I mean, I will go right in and look on that site, but you can see some of the responses. I'll give you an example. There's one that sticks out to me. It was maybe 2023, and it was a recommendation around APB policies or something of that nature. And there was definitely a response there, but the actual request from the OIG didn't necessarily align. And so in that, her recommendations or the office's recommendations don't actually look the same as they did in 2023. So in that one, it may have said something like, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but it may say something like, we believe, I'll just do it like this. We believe that APB should do X, Y, and Z. And after reviewing it, let's say with legal or whoever, it's like, man, that actually doesn't mind and you can't do that. Well, you receive, hey, we received your recommendations and we will evaluate. But what was determined is there is no response necessary or there's no action necessary because it doesn't align with state law and requirements. So from there, we have responded, we have received it, and we have evaluated it, but there's no response there. Now, to the OIG's credit, and go look at them. The responses or the recommendations in 2023 look very different than in 2025. They're robust, you can respond to them and you can say, hey, the administration accepts 2 of these 3, but these we will not be enacting, et cetera. How they were issued in the beginning don't really look like that. They were almost 1 or 2 page. Here's a summary of what we looked at and go forward. So there's a little bit of content that probably needs to be added. To our credit, we responded to all of those recently. I think one of them, the response wasn't love, like let's say Accenture, for example, but it was a very thorough and robust response. And we have endeavored to do that for everything that has come to us. And we'll continue.
So thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you for the invite. I'm sorry I did not start with that. Thank you for inviting us. I think it's the first time I've been invited and we'd love to come back.
I think we have you. The events of the past, 9 months have been, great for a lot of this, creating change for the better for the city in general. But also the events of the past 9 months have been more things on the scene. And I think for this city, a lot of the discussion about this issue has been in a very adversarial. And I think the average citizen of the city of Atlanta would rather not have the OIG and the administration in an adversarial relationship. So as we get to come to a close with some of these sort of issues, what do you want to do to repair the relationship with the election to be able to move forward in a productive manner? And that's obviously a side equation, but what do you want to do for the administration?
I almost got up and came over there and gave you a hug. No, I mean, that's a great question, but I think, but I would also say, let's start and just look at the frame. I don't think y'all have had an opportunity to hear from the administration. To my knowledge, this is our first time. I think that's a part of it. I'm not saying that we're right, and I've highlighted this one time, but you go back and look, a lot of things that we're not going to be extraordinarily happy about this legislation. You haven't really heard from the administration on that. So I would also ask, when you talk about the adversarial approach and the tone and all of those things, you go back and look at all the videos floating and all of that. I mean, I know you haven't heard from me. You only heard from the mayor one time, and he offered an olive branch in a public meeting. So then you have to ask yourself, where is that adversarial tone coming from? And I will leave that for you to decide, but I would hope you so objective. The second piece of it is, I think the key to why we got to where we are, it's been 9 months, maybe even more. But really in the last 3, there's been a whole lot of talking, a whole lot of meetings, and a whole lot of folks addressing these activities. And that's the revolution for everything in government. You start off with the legislation. I heard the young lady ask, why would they have not included that first? And, you know, looks like an oversight or a bad decision or whatever you want to call it, or something that didn't engage everybody, but regardless, resolved now. But it got resolved because they had raised their hand and said, hold on, include us. Other people came forward and said, let's talk about that. You gotta have more expertise, but that doesn't mean this level of expertise gets taken away. How do you get both? You come up with a resolution that folks can agree with. I think that's what I would like to see more. Just because it's hard and it's unpopular doesn't mean that it's not right. Or y'all don't know me, Adam, but You look at my track record, I've been in Savannah, South Florida, all over the place right now, talking about different things, Augusta, here, the District of Columbia. It's tough, man. In government, making right decisions for the people is never free when you're making the tough decisions. And so I think the discourse and the dialogue, though, is what gets us to the right space. I'm not completely happy with where the legislation is. I would imagine OIG's office isn't either. Neither is the ethics office. Neither is all of those people that Mr. Taylor highlighted. Nobody's completely happy. We probably all get us in a room, but we're completely honest. It's much better than where it was. That means it's good legislation. Not everybody, nobody should be happier than the other. And that all happened because of communication, a little bit of conflict to get us to where we're going. And what I would really like to see is more of that, but a little more cooperative play. Like the OIG has a very valuable job. They are to hold us accountable. They are to provide best practices and recommendations and things of that nature. And then you incorporate them or you don't, but it is to be provided. And that is a valuable resource. And then we have to evaluate with law, HR, all of these other people and figure out how to incorporate those things. Same thing with the ethics office, with council, and with others. So I would just like to see what we've done in the last 3 months, maybe done a little bit early, but I would see as the utopia, just more conversation on the hard stuff and figure out how to come to a conclusion sooner that works for everybody, because it matters.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Donald, for, the request to be here before we have to be here. And I will say we've talked about that level of expertise. This is a group that represents a wide swath of people and access to resources, particularly human resources. So I want to give credit to this group as much as possible for their resilience throughout this entire time and their dedication to being a neutral party, to being collaborative, and to being willing to hear both sides and analyzing what's best for the American citizen, because that's why we're here. And with that being said, at the beginning of this, one of our recommendations was to have the Association of Inspectors General present. It was to have an open discussion, and so we're talking about it would have been better if those things would have happened. Well, we recommended those things. But for those, I just want to kind of re-elevate that to your attention that we realized that a while ago and have been asking for those conversations to be had because a lot of this could have been.
Where did you bring that group come in? One, they were part of the work session, but I think he also mentioned with the public, and I know at the time at the board retreat, that person was there, we were there, so was their board. And so there are multiple times that engagement has occurred, including with the task force. I don't know how public that was, but great recommendation from APAB. And I'll also say, but I noticed you mentioned that. My recommendation, while I'm familiar with APAB, I don't know each and every member, I should, so I'm gonna make that my duty. But in addition to that, the key point that I would make is, just using y'all as an example, there's 30 people in a room and you've got 10 boards, all 30 of them are gonna have the expertise that you have, and all 30 of them would be appropriate as an oversight board, something of that nature. Maybe y'all are unique to that, but all of the others wouldn't be. So just using that example to know that there has to be some level of subject matter expertise in anything that we do, because we're responsible to our citizens. So hopefully then offended by using that example, because I'm not as up to speed on some of those things that you might have been.
No, not offense, but I do realize I'm just elevating that here that we are going to transition ourselves as our that we are that resource, and that while those recommendations are looked at, but I think that they should think that recommendation actually came for the work session. What is months before that, and could have alleviated And so one final comment is, you talked about the Office of Ethics and the Office of Inspector General and how they operate and make sure that the charter amendment is, good and reflective of that. I don't think that the current legislation actually reflects the needs of the Office of Ethics. It doesn't seem to be much different from what is for the Office of the Inspector General. So I just want to raise that there's,
Please look at this presentation a little bit, look at those.
I don't have it. I know you said, well,
So I would just say, please give it a look, because we've actually had a call with the ethics and them recently where they, highlighted some of those changes that they wanted. They've been incorporated in, very similar to the others. I think the focus has been on the OIG, but the strengthening of the ethics office is absolutely included. And you'll see in this presentation, some of those adjustments as well. And I think they're very happy with it. So I would just encourage you to look at that as well as the most recent version of the legislation. But I think you would a little different than what I thought, but there have been a lot of changes.
Yeah.
So I can understand, that position as of now.
okay, all right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank y'all for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right, next we have, Art of Reference, we define with your fund, balance from Martin. All right, planning initiatives with, the Commissioner Fritz.
That's okay.
So, Commissioner Fritz, you'll have, 7 minutes for your presentation, and then we'll have questions.
Okay, I'm gonna go and attend the webinar. So most of you, so this should be pretty quick. Morning and thanks for coming. So we have legislative items coming to the end. And yeah, so it's good. Right. First, the party topic. So you all know that changes to the zoning ordinance come to the end. Right? The party house ordinance is in the zoning ordinance that we have. And guess what? It's already there. But it's not written very clearly. And because of that, it's difficult to enforce. So we asked the law department to write it for us, not to change the rules at all, but just to make it clearer and easier to enforce. So a party house is basically when you rent a house, throw a great big bash to raise money for something, or raise money for your family. Right? Think about during the pandemic, people were renting Airbnbs and the bars weren't open, so they turned houses into bars, right? Police have to enforce this ordinance in the middle of the night. They're real easy done. So that's what we were doing here. The reason we decided that we should do this, not just because it wasn't super clear, but also because we were asked to write the short-term rental ordinance based on a recent court decision advised by the law department. Now, the short-term rental ordinance is a licensing ordinance. That means it would not and be used. But it didn't make any sense to me to bring this to you without bringing the bigger picture. You need to see the changes in the short-term rental ordinance, be able to understand all of it together. So for things that don't normally come to that use, like short-term rentals ordinance, we're allowed to bring things with fees hardship. Don't have to bring them to them, because we're not required, but the code said that we may bring them fees, but we're allowed to bring the short-term rental ordinance to y'all. And bring it to you for review and comment, and honestly, that's what's super important to us, because the court decision that prompted us rewriting the short-term rentals ordinance had us going in a little bit different direction on the rules. And getting your feedback is important for us. So the gist of it is, it's no longer tied to where you live. You may remember that the short-term rentals ordinance says, in have your house as a short-term rental, you can have like 2 units based on where you live. The court decision says short-term rental licenses can no longer be tied to where you live. That changes the rules. Own as many short-term rentals as you want, no matter where you live. It goes up from $150 per unit to $250. As you know, these are supposed to be tied to the cost, staff time, to process the application. This takes on a lot of time. Now, the gist of it on the short-term rentals is they have to be 1,000 feet apart. The reason why is because you don't want 20 of them on your block. Yeah, you got it. That's right. Yeah, I don't either. It's already too much. Yeah. In a multi-family building, we're going to limit the percentage of units that can be short-term rentals. That limit condos. Next slide. Here's the timeline for the short-term rentals ordinance and the party pass ordinance. Remember, they're traveling together because they're related. So right now, they're in front of all of you for rentals. You want to comment? Party house, go vote. Remember, the rules on party house are the same. I'm sure some rentals just to review and comment. So what you're doing here is you're reviewing and commenting on the rules for short-term rentals. And on party house, you are affirming whether you want to basically convert it. Rules and change. Which meant I was on my last week. I wanted to go. So then the party house ordinance goes to the zoning review board. Because remember, it's a change to the zoning ordinance. The end date for full council adoption would be in April. That's what we're shooting for. Go on to. Okay, let's talk about the tree protection one. Same deal here, guys. There's a change to the zoning ordinance that's associated with this. I'll wait to that slide. Oh, you go forward. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it's over again. There you go. This is a change to the zoning ordinance. You can tell. Lots of cities and counties have administrative variances. You all know that variances go to Board of Zoning Adjustment. But a lot of places have what's called an administrative variance that is decided by staff. We're proposing an administrative variance for tree protection. Not for any other reason, just for tree protection. And only in the side yard setback. And only for what's called priority trees. Effect sheets there, so it defines what a priority tree is, but basically it's a tree that's 6 inches thick, that's one of the species that is a priority for the city. So it's gonna be like native trees, the good trees, the ones that everybody likes and pays lots of money to plant in their yards. So this would be probably, maybe not a very frequent thing, but what we wanted to do is we wanted to make it easier to save the trees. So if there is a priority tree, 6 inches or larger, in the buildable area where a house is being built, the administrative setback variance would give our staff the ability to say, yes, we can scooch the house a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, just enough to save that tree. Came up with this because we wanted to make it easier to save trees. This was something that had to be in the zoning ordinance, even though we're asked to rewrite the tree protection ordinance, raise the recompense. But we wanted to make it easier to save the tree, so we had to amend the zoning ordinance. Because setback variance would be in the zoning ordinance, not in the tree protection ordinance, right? So they had to travel together, the administrative variance and the tree protection ordinance. Seems it looks like, I don't know, Jay. Okay. Okay, now can we go back to the beginning of the. There you go, there you go. All right, so the big reason for rewriting the tree protection ordinance is raising the recompense. What's recompense, you wonder? Recompense is what you pay when you can't plant a required tree on the lot, and the city has to plant that tree somewhere else for you. When the tree protection ordinance was written in 2001, the fees were set. They haven't been changed since then. So we're changing the formula here. It's right now it's $100 a tree plus $30 an inch, right? It's a greater bid for one pay. More simplified in the new standard, but it's a big jump. It's 260, that's right, it's a big jump. And there is some concern about, this impacting building and developing properties. So what we're going to do is we're going to phase it in. Now, the tree protection ordinance is not an ordinance that would normally come to the MPUs. But because there is a change right here in the recompense, we are allowed to bring it to you. So we did. We want you to see the big picture. The administrative setback variance and the tree protection ordinance, they go together, they work together. That's why they're both here. Next slide. Changes in the standards for single family. Pretty simple here. Right now, the tree ordinance only saves the trees in the setback. All right, but what if the good trees are in other parts of the lot? The idea was to provide more flexibility so the bigger trees can save. That's the whole idea behind it. Next slide. Commercial, industrial, and mixed use properties, they have a little more flexibility. They're allowed to do more planting and less saving. We have heard some objection to this. And I'm going to tell you about the other feedback we've got. Next slide. Go to the timeline. Timeline on this one is the same as the short-term rentals / party house ordinance. But it's a little bit more to digest. So even though we have April as the final adoption date, I think it might stretch to the next meeting. We ask for questions. Two deputy commissioners are there in the back way. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Kennedy, but you haven't met, James and Elias yet. She's been with us for what, 3 months now?
Yeah, about 3 months.
Feels like 3 years, right?
3 years though.
We get a lot of great feedback from the NPUs and also from, presented this to the technical advisory committee, which is, our builders and developers. Presented this to the housing commission. Wanted to explain to them how affordable housing developments will get, waivers. On the tree protection ordinance, waivers are from the representatives. They'll still do planting, but if it can't fit based on how affordable they are, how much affordable they are, you don't have to pay the representatives. That's it to them too. Got a lot of feedback. Something that's come up since we started this process is that people are starting to get letters from their insurance companies asking that they take down trees. Yeah, give us funny looks. Has anybody got one of those letters?
I did.
Okay, so, Councilor Dorwin told me that she got one of those letters. But basically, people are concerned because their insurance companies are demanding that they take down trees, and it may be contradictory to what's in the tree ordinance. So we're hearing that, keep it back.
Actually, Commissioner Prince, we're gonna start taking questions.
Oh, sure.
Ms. King?
A comment on the tree, generally of the insurance policy, from what I remember is that if you have been notified that the tree is dead, is the way that it has to come down, because it's liability. So the neighbor could say it, or even, I've never heard of a good tree having to be removed. I'm a comment on that. About that, when it's the limbs are, when it's too close.
Okay.
And that's something I think that we can look into. And, the arborist will come out and determine if your tree should come down, because if it's dead, dying, or hazardous, take it down. Sure. I think the concern was the conflict between a healthy tree being real close to a house. That wasn't my original question, if I can.
Let's change the, okay, South Tyler, actually in first, so I got the South was King this morning. The talking this morning, and then it's just third. But that's that one.
You talk, you want reviewing comment, instead of getting budget back. Changes ongoing, and my other question was, everyone's gonna have products on the tree, that's not on the tree, all the products on the tree. I think I heard in that webinar that while there's this new legislation would say no to 100,000 feet, I thought that I said, there is already within 1,000 feet, the grandfather, and there's going to be 50 days. Day grace period after this ordinance is signed, there is the Wild West. If you go and get permits that will be grandfathered, if the 1,000 feet will only apply to people in the future. And if you go out tomorrow after this is signed for 15 days, you get 100, then should be within 1,000 feet. But they know what they're doing with that.
So if you are already operating short-term, and it's like, if you want, as long as you're trying to do your license. No. Don't ever like this, you can get it right. Now is what I am recommending, because we had an original draft of the ordinance had that sort of grace period that I believe that was. No, I was saying spoke, but I said that the original draft.
So we should be doing all of these things.
Yes.
And it's obviously, Are you making changes? So here's the changes. But what people just without change.
So here's what happens is we introduce an ordinance, right? And it's actually happening with the legislative process all the time. The ordinance is introduced. And then people react to it. And then you probably heard of like a substitute ordinance being introduced. And that would be to address people saying, hey, you still got this part, or you need to add this other thing. And that could happen. It could happen with any ordinance that's out there at any time. Or we could come back, say, no, what you name. We need to make sure we add this provision. The condo buildings need additional protection and the apartment buildings don't. Or we need to protect these kinds of trees, but not these kinds of trees.
So you guys are gonna do that, or we can get how it's
I'm saying we can do it, no, you can't do it right now, but yes.
So follow-up question to that, if there was substitute language, substitute ordinance, and the improvements that are proposed, that means that if something changes and they don't want that change, they voted for something that they actually don't like, but they have the opportunity to have that presented to them again, and vote on the substitute ordinance.
So the city council could send it back to the information, like if there are like big sea changes, but if we insert 3 words, then probably not.
This doesn't know the fact that you get first here in the still. This page here.
One of the things that you mentioned, and I feel I haven't watched the webinar yet. The bylaws of most condo buildings, I can't say most, but have a restriction on rental, short-term and or long-term, or no rentals at all. And sometimes it's even financial regulations as for banking as to whether they can get a loan. So the 10% concerns me because I would be worried that someone could say the city, even though the state supersedes that, I could see us having to go to court to stand firm on our bylaws. So some language that are there for multifamily, maybe it could say 10% or as applicable per your bylaws, no more than 2% or applicable by your bylaws.
So I got some comment from several condo owners, and I used to hear one when I was in and now I'm old. But the concern was that if condo owners hoped that we would have the rules for the condos because they didn't want their condo association to have to spend lots of money to enforce a percentage cap on the number of units that could be rented or could be turned into short-term rentals. And we, to that end, we're requiring basically an umbrella permit for multifamily structures. Right, so the property owner in the case of apartment buildings and the homeowners or condo association in the case of condominiums has to get the blank or the umbrella permit. And without that, the individual condo owners, or in the case of apartment buildings, the individual units cannot be permitted as short-term rentals.
Okay, 2 questions. First, on the party house. My concern is kind of like the condos, but different because of an HOA community. How can we, as an HOA, work within the law? Because there might be, 4 or 5 homes within our community. That we might not want that anymore. So how can we work with that? And then my other question is about the tree ordinance. The tree ordinance to me seems to put the burden on the individual homeowner versus the developer. And I have a personal issue with that, is as individual homeowners, why am I paying more or assessed more than a developer would be assessed? I think that's very, lopsided. How as to restate it, other than, we have, similar to the condo, conversation, we have an HOA. So in the HOA community, and right now, I believe there would be considered, 4, party homes. So, short-term rental, that whole, two different things. Are you talking about short-term rental, or are you talking about party houses, where they have parties, where they do, they go in, okay, yeah, they could go, they could, is that what you're talking about, though? Yes. A little bit of both, okay. So, ultimately, with the legislation here, how could we work within our HOA so that we're not working against or we're utilizing this to help us?
So here's the thing.
So here's the thing, if it's condominium ownership, then it would be covered under the percentage cap. But if they are single family detached, each of the houses where you own the ground under your house, if that be our symbol, then it wouldn't be included in the percentage cap. No, I mean, it wouldn't be included in the multifamily rules, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it wouldn't be covered by the multifamily rules. If it's about the ownership style or ownership structure, if it's all in a building or complex, and it's condominium ownership, then the multifamily rules apply. If it's not condominium ownership, if it's fee simple, then the 1,000 feet separation applies. Now, if these are properly licensed short-term rentals that are already there, they can be grandfathered. Unless we don't choose it. Okay. And that's a code enforcement issue, and we have lots of code enforcement issues, and that's part of why we hire students. Now, back to the tree ordinance. We are hearing a lot about how this relies too much on single family lots and how there's sort of a disparity between single family and basically everything that's not single family. What the arborist will tell you is that single family is what we have most of. City can, it's where most of the trees are. But I agree with you. There's more of a burden on the single family lots. Some of the members of our development community have expressed concern that we are also rewriting the zoning ordinance at this time. Okay, and we'll finish with that until early next year, at least 2026. They want to see how it all works together. So some of them have been asking, could we take more time with the tree protection ordinance and test it together with the zoning ordinance rules? You don't get to debate the zoning ordinance. They want us to take that time to test the tree ordinance as well. That's what we're hearing from them. So y'all asked about substitute ordinances. Well, the other thing that can happen is city council could hold it and say, Janae, I want you to spend more time with this. We want you to test it more.
The topic board. Just good. Good morning. You know, this tree ordinance has been blowing for a while. Maybe to One thing that I remember that was relevant to me is the tree on my neighbor's yard looks scary. That now I don't have to wait for it to fall, but learners who see us.
There's specific rules about boundary trees and trees that are very close to the property line. If the ordinance and I think we've read the ordinance and do discussions about it.
Okay, but that possibly could but wasn't there some remedy for the homeowner now? That sometimes had to have to wait for the trees to fall versus being really proactive.
Oh, yeah, the dead dying has.
Yeah, that's the one. So what is the rule?
I don't know the ordinance.
Okay, no worries. I didn't mean it to be the.
I'll look at it for you. We'll look at it.
No worries.
That's 100 federal law.
Good morning, Commissioner Friends. My question is related to cultural events. In our city, we have single home, we have single home, we have renters, we have people who rent single homes. That always rental housing, we also have quite a few LLCs that buy the housing stock all throughout the city. I would be arguing also. It's still out of house, out of 20. And their interests are different. Often I would say they don't bounce in the with neighborhoods and establishments. And anyone looking at potential unintended consequences of the short-term rental legislation that you have on communities. And also other people develop on what out there, and they're going to gain, big money. And also, I was recently live in having also driving. In addition to that, at the state capital, there is legislation being proposed to kind of bring in LLCs in homeownership. Will that happen?
So that remains to be seen what happens with that. As you know, our intergovernmental affairs, people are following that very closely. They do send bills over to us every week to look at, to review and comment on how we think they will affect us. I agree with you about the companies buying the houses. And the difficult piece of this is that it was a circuit court decision about how you cannot make the rules based upon where the owner lives. Because for a lot of years, I was a city planning consultant. And when I would advise cities and counties about how to write their short-term rental ordinance, I would say, tie it to home ownership, right? It's your house, rented out as short-term rental or apartment or your agency like that. Because that would get the lid on the parties. Because if it's your house, you're not going to let people do anything too crazy on your property. And that was really well for a long time. And now we have this court decision, and everybody is grappling. Everybody is trying to figure out, okay, what do we do now? How do we keep the lid on this? How do we make this work? Because for so long, we would say, this helps keep the lid on anything crazy happening, and it offsets the cost of home ownership, right? If you can rent it out from time to time when there's a big event in town or something. But unfortunately, we have to be mindful of how to keep this city. So we're sort of feeling our way with this, and that's part of why we want feedback from all of y'all.
I guess it's a follow to that. Is it, well, you all, actually done the watching, but the other code enforcement bodies, authorities, because I think there'll be some help in those areas to help. Because it's not just a single, the social penalty, but it's the other things. They don't know when our trash is. So they need trash there. So there is a culture piece there that, I would say the neighborhood has responsibility. I don't want to touch about my house. And they do a great job. But we wouldn't help anyway. open some here, but this year, but also that person looking for the job. I don't know.
The good news is that the new ordinance requires that there be an agent that can be reached in 24 hours a day, and the agent has to be located, basically like the county manager, so they have to be located within, I believe it's like within the 10 counties around Metro Atlanta, so that they can be there quickly should there be an emergency.
Anticipate getting additional spaces, so it's citizen. Another issue, back to native, issue of the home.
I do not anticipate getting additional code enforcement resources. However, I think our code enforcement is going to start working better very, very soon because of this young lady right here. You may know that not all of our codes are enforced by the Department of City Planning. Just the codes that are relative to us, so things like zoning, working without a permit and stuff like that, but some of the codes are enforced by APG. Okay, so some of the codes are enforced by Public Works, by HDL DOT. There's a lot of different codes that fall under the different departments' purview. So they are all working on those. And there's a little bit of a disconnect, I think, on those code enforcement efforts. And we are bringing the group together, and we are meeting with the city solicitor to try to improve our effectiveness on code enforcement. We're also looking at, you guys know that code enforcement fines are $1,000. And they have been $1,000 for what seems like forever. And I don't know anymore, to some people, it seems like they just view it as the cost of doing business. They don't mind getting those fines. So we're looking at that too. What would have to happen in state law to increase misdemeanor fines just for repeat code enforcement and not runs. So we're looking at all people from it.
Yes. At my mind. In the past, in terms of governments, property. Have you made any work?
So what we want to do there is, honestly, I think it's a possibility with our new judge. We got a new judge assigned to us this year. And talk about what is the best way to address our case, what is the most helpful to the judge. We already talked to the solicitor's office. One of our former employees actually went to work there. So, he's been super helpful for us, figuring out how to present our cases and how to build them in such a way that they will be proposed to go effective. But there's a lot to this code enforcement work. It's not as simple and as straightforward as changing the code. It's this process of improving code enforcement. I think it's going to be like the process that we used to fix permitting. Somebody here might know how long it has taken us to really improve our permitting process.
You had the question next. Did you?
Not really a question. We got,
What do you, Mr. Schooper is after this time. Right, we have a whole line of people, so that's what I'm
they
saying.
got files, and I don't think,
there was a specific question that asked me. Is there an enforcement piece in your ordinance?
Can you repeat that for us, Mr. Toomer?
Is there an enforcement piece in your ordinance? I don't think I'm seeing.
In the tree protection ordinance. Oh, there's a whole section of it. It's Division 16.
And in terms of what I'm talking about, the enforcement, that's the enforcement side. How that process.
Okay, so once a person is cited, it goes to the municipal court, where our inspectors are involved as witnesses. We send over all of the information and they go on court day. A lot of times our inspectors are not inspecting because they're court waiting for the case to be called, because they're testifying, because they're giving over the information.
This arranges stamps. And very good job. But really good. And you can see what happens when somebody does not comply. And it's 6,000, that's no two, four, so. Possibly. One time, place. Because I'm there's some very bad situations which are things on and the voting people come back and report that it's not. So, to create a scenario.
Can I interject on that? I think that's a different discussion because it's similar to any sort of judicial reform, criminal proceeding. Once, if someone is arrested and then they move to the court, it's now how they can stand. So I think this is a similar case. If there has been a citation issue and it's gone to municipal court, then that is an issue for the courts. I don't think it should be stressed in this ordinance.
Following up on what you're saying, for instance, in criminal court, if you fail to appear, you are arrested. And more is issued. And that's the kind of thing.
That's a court decision. That's a bench decision.
I mean, last of all, I just like to thank Ms. LaRue, Deputy Commissioner, for reviewing interviews, cues, requests to have the Ramsey look at again, because I know that your work with us is fast. We appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. We really appreciate it.
Okay,
I can clarify something real quick. I want to go back to what Amy asked me about the 15 days. I had Denise check so that I can make sure that I got it right. For 15 days, the ordinance goes into effect 15 days after the mayor signs it. But the old ordinance is in place until then. So when I said that everybody would be coming in to get their licenses, what I meant is that they would be coming in to get them, so that they would have the license in place already when the ordinance goes into effect. And I'm sorry if that was.
The old one.
It's in effect until, no, it doesn't. So, and that is the case right now. Yes. Okay, just want to make sure that we were clear, because that was not clear, and I want to make sure that everybody understood.
Mr. Taylor?
I thought about into producing impact fees, leveraging this impact fees to either promote planting of trees or removing trees, or of income restrictions.
So the thing about impact fees is if we waive them, you have to top up with another source of revenue to replace them. And that's what's typical. So when cities are impacting you, they have to be mindful of that. When you're writing an impact fee ordinance, which we are not, but if we were, you have to, when you say, okay, we're gonna exempt impact fees for these particular types of projects or land uses. I once worked for a city where they said if you brought in research facilities, they would waive your impact fees. You have to be ready to replace that money because the capital improvements element of your comprehensive plan is based on those revenues. So, she here, we don't know something about that. The point is, you have to replace the revenues. So if we want to look at that, we've got to find another funding source.
Oh, man,
Yeah.
just said, I'm sorry, you can't see me back here. Go ahead. Good morning, Jan, you said about every commissioner operations. Just wanted to also clarify that impact fees are only used for 3 areas: for public safety, for parks and recreation, but that's primarily for the purchase of park land or for the construction of a facility, and then also for transportation. So accommodate the replacement of trees would take a change in legislation. So just to let you know that.
As far as, me to brief, the short-term rental, it's been talked about, but not enforced properly. How are you gonna address that when some of these larger, like apartment complexes, because of low inventory, they've been doing short-term rentals? How are you gonna police that? I know you said you're gonna get an umbrella. How are you gonna police how many units that they rent out?
So the complex has to have the umbrella that you don't see. And then the individual units may become short-term rentals. There's a software that we have that trawls all of the websites that list short-term rentals. And that's what we will base our enforcement off.
All right, just, I want to just go back really quickly to the HOA. If an HOA bylaw absolutely forbids short-term rentals from your community, it supersedes that and allows them to have 10% yields.
Okay, so is this community? Are they, the units be simple or are they?
It's not many times.
Okay. So if it's multifamily, it falls under the percentage. If it's a condominium.
So they have to throw their bylaws out and write in here in different terms.
So the bylaws could be different. And I will tell you what I tell everybody who lives in a condo. Your bylaws in a condominium are as strong as your condominium bank. Because you have to hire lawyers to enforce it.
The other question I had was around, the ownership of residency. So if someone lives in Texas, they can, I see a cottage industry that's not already started with these agents placing themselves in Fulton, Cobb, Clayton, Gwinnett, Albany, et cetera, right? Someone's in Texas, but their agent has a post office box or something in Gwinnett, Clayton, right? And they're like, okay, I've circumvented the having to be in these, places as resident, but they accomplish thing. In that sense, it can be very creative regarding it. And the other thing is this, they're also being creative with this thing called pad stone, where they're actually now renting individual rooms inside the house. And my understanding, and this is on the East Lake community thread on Facebook, is that city does not collect garbage from these entities. So the garbage just sits out there. So they have to hire 5 entities.
That's not a short-term rental. I own them too, but that's really fine, not short-term. They're not short-term rentals, that's what usually, have a 3-month rental.
Well, actually, it's like weekly or monthly.
But, no, but they pay,
But is it a loophole?
yes, but they have a real estate or at least,
But your question, about, and split, although it belongs to me. that would be considered a rooming house. And there are zoning districts in the city that allow rooming houses with I believe it's a special use permit. So if there is a rooming house operating somewhere where it's not allowed, let's.
Yeah, so we have a order of people, so I'll get back to you. Mr. Martin?
Yes, when you were, drafting your revision to the tree ordinance, taking into consideration the resolution passed by this body on that topic.
So, yes, we have been looking at everything, basically. I was not the project manager for the, drafting of the tree ordinance. Andrew Walter was. And he could give you more detail as to what the committee who wrote the ordinance talked about in the meetings. We had the working group, and they met 32 times to discuss all of this and provided a report to our team. It was Andrew Walter, who's a landscape architect, and a group of arborists who drafted the ordinance with all of the information. And that was when I was out on medical leave. So Shannon may be able to speak more to the conversation that happened.
I bring this up because some resolutions don't have any lost.
Oh, yeah, no, that was not.
So really, resolutions haven't been lost. That's what I was gonna say. This one was 3 years. Your part. I was gonna say the point, and not since we are.
To just go back and ask the question regarding past, because I for some reason thought that it was considered short-term rentals because they go in there 10 to rent to lease, need to be online to learn. My question is, I want to clarify, where does it fall, since it does not fall under short term? And then you made the comment of what has been, how do you certify they are legal in place? And I say that because to your question regarding the chance, one of them just showed up one day and the single families, they good, I live. As it relates to the garbage, obviously, they're going to home, we had to ensure that people fast did not restrict everyone in trash to pick up. And they do the same thing this season, they put trash out on Thursday, it's picked up, and had to just really help them, educate them around, hey, take your trash and get that off. So yes, or enforcement or education, being proactive. But I need to know what is the process for finding out whether or not that split is just even legally there, because it just showed up. It looked as if the person that lived there was actually doing perhaps a renovation, and then the next thing you know, all these different cars started to show up, and we had to do some intel to discover that that's what it really is. So how do we verify if it should or should not be?
Give us a call and we'll look it up.
And that's including commissioner.
You can call the office of zoning and development, because they will check the zoning on the property by that address.
Okay.
And if it's, I mean, well, obviously, if it's there legally, and then that would be a question of how would they, how would but proactively, not after the fact, because that's a bias, discovering after the fact. How do we know? Did we get that here? Has somebody informed us here? But
So a special use permit is required, because there's a particular zoning district that allows and you have to get a special use permit, so that would go through the zoning board. And it would come to you, because it is a zoning change. Don't special use permits function that.
not this, like that.
So if I could. And the problems I see this as president board. As this, and I'm actually learning to listen to actually this hard, and not illegal in the city. Because of the current definition of family that is currently It allows how many unrelated people to live?
Six.
Six. But it's illegal, that's how you catch this tax, you have a one-bedroom house. And they come in and usually illegally renovate that house and turn it to a 6, 8, that is illegal. So I don't know if probably, they're not very permanent. That is how it's illegal. But for 6 unrelated people to live in a house, all they maintain weekly, all they maintain monthly, they have at least a 3-month lease. That's not, so it's not structured, not personal. They do not register that as a business. They don't register it anywhere in the city. That is a gap in terms of how they think about it. It's not even considered technically a loan house officially because we can do it in one house.
So look, let me just add on to that. About the definition of family, because this has come up recently, and we've seen a lot of emails about it. The current ordinance says up to 6 unrelated people in a house may be considered a family. And a family can have 4 boarders and an unlimited number of household employees. So what that means is a family is an unlimited number. For many, many years, the definition of family was used in code enforcement to enforce against illegal rooming houses. Okay, that's what is a house. But there's better ways to enforce rooming houses. You don't need to worry about the definition of family. I don't care if you have 27 kids. Not worried about that. However, with the rooming houses, they do have to have that special use permit. And a lot of them don't. So if you see this, let us know.
All right, Dr. Stout, and then I'll be the one.
And did you say in the webinar that a party house requires an SAP or SUP?
It's an SUP.
So that was one of the. I've never seen that. So, and then it seems like we have the technology, all this thing should be used on city website, what address do you have? And SUP, all this stuff we have the technology, maybe we shouldn't have to call you this year, we can look and see what address it has, party house, the person renting permit, all the things. That's my favorite.
Thanks.
Hold on, just to clarify, yes, we're looking. It's still a part of it. Just to remember, there are also areas that allow party houses, but it still requires an SUP. Okay. Mr. Barnett.
Sure, Prince, thank you for having me these legislation to mainly. The connection is important. In you is really looking forward to hearing folks with these or that want to use the legislation. We have a variety of experience in these worlds within our neighborhoods. But we are really exhausted at the moment. And I will say this in a moment of commiseration, because the board exhausted, I know that you're also exhausted in PTSD. All of this concept of legislation, we have noticed that we are rewriting the zoning code. We have noticed that we've noticed that there's a development density bonus, something that we certainly had. There's a data center. We have a lot on our plate right now. That we're being asked to, and if you have really advocate for our neighbors, for organizations, for our volunteers and our individuals, to give us more time to provide the level of necessary. I think today's discussion is a great example of the such density now that can be all of this really appreciate. Kind of get into the road with some of these things on time. And then I would advocate that when we are doing these amazing pieces of legislation that are made real substantive change, but they're also to set a reminder and let's formalize the process where 4 years from now, we're not back around. And it just has to push that together. You sit down and you say, okay, it's been 40 years. How is this working? Where do we need to do the legislative change to formalize that process rather than waiting for where it all build up into an explosion of this is no longer working, we've got big changes. So just a little bit of recommendation there. Thank you so much.
That's a great suggestion, and we talked about, timing on all of our work and trying to make sure fewer things happen during. No, actually it is, it's just how long things have taken and the timing was not to the rich. Trust me, I would have loved to have all of this sooner. When I came to work for the city 2.5 years ago, I was given a to-do list. And honestly, we've been chugging away on all of this stuff and it is a little bit of a perfect storm right now, but like the weather.
I'd just like to add, that's a great suggestion, and we have actually, implanted that suggestion in the TPO. So we now will be revisiting it every 5 years. So I love it, and I think it can be, it's something that can be applied to the zoning ordinance, to our STR, all those types of things, to just take a revisit and see how it's working and adjust and tweak those things that are or are not working.
Oh, y'all, Jandy makes an excellent point. You know that we measure the tree canopy every 5 years. And that tells us how well a tree ordinance is working.
Oh, oh, you think for today? You need to be clean.
On the same one over the election.
All right, we have planning report from Smith Media Outreach. About the neighborhood green change policy. She's not.
I was waiting on the bus and didn't realize. Got it in mind.
Get your own design from
So,
that's what happened.
oh, yeah. That's unfortunate.
She did.
So we're waiting on you.
Okay, so hey y'all. Hey. For the sake of those watching, Leah LaRue, Director of Neighborhood Planning in the City of Atlanta in the Department of City Planning. I'm really happy to have my department leadership here with us today. So as you all know, we had intentions of starting our Planning Atlanta Together initiative in the third part of the 50th anniversary year, which was last year. Our intention was to start the conversation around reimagining neighborhood engagement and reimagining the MPU system. And it's several factors, including all of this stuff that we're working on right now, these 4 items, plus everything else that is coming down the pipe. We thought it best to hold off on beginning the heavy lifting of the Planning Atlanta Together initiative. So that, as I told y'all a couple months ago, we won't begin the heavy lifting on that until later this year. And that will just be the engagement. So somewhere around gotta think this through a little bit, but somewhere around late fall, early winter, we will present to y'all the engagement plan to get your feedback, the same plan that we recommended other departments follow, bringing the draft of the engagement plan, getting your input on that draft, and then coming back the following month to get you to adopt the engagement plan for Planning Atlanta Together. That will happen somewhere around the end of this year, perhaps beginning of next year. And then we'll start the heavy lifting after that with all of the community conversations, webinars, reviewing of the code, et cetera. For now, we have one policy that could not wait. And that is our renaming a neighborhood policy. For reasons, I'll be honest, I can't quite articulate the reason that it became urgent, but it did become urgent that we adopt a policy to rename a neighborhood. You have the draft in your packet, and we're presenting that to you today for your feedback, and we'll ask you to to recommend it next month so that we can implement and finalize the policy for renaming a neighborhood. So to answer some of the questions that I think you may have, we do not currently have a policy at all. There isn't one to rename a neighborhood. It has been done differently over the years in ways that definitely are absolutely not best practice, in ways that are not consistent with other cities, other similar cities, and in ways that are not even consistent with how we rename streets, how we rename parks, or how we rename anything else. So we put together this policy. Again, it's a draft. We welcome your input. It takes into account a lot of things, in particular, how other cities renamed neighborhoods and how the city of Atlanta renamed streets and parks. And I will do my best to answer any questions that you might have about it. But in short, we're proposing to require 25% of the neighborhood's population to sign off on the application. We're proposing to require public engagement in the neighborhood, or by the officially recognized neighborhood associations and business associations. We're of course recommending that meetings be held virtually and in person. We're also looking to see evidence of outreach efforts so that we know that the neighborhood did everything it could to get the word out so that people will be aware, even if they're not active in their neighborhood association or they're not active in their MU, that they live there and they were aware that this was happening. We are encouraging a steering committee as well as letters of support from the officially recognized neighborhood organization, business organizations, and MPUs, and a neighborhood map. And that's it. Madam President, ready to take questions. Mr. Stupid's hand was up first. That I know. I didn't see anybody else, but before I got the first word out, he was like,
So, Leah,
yes, sir.
are you asking this body to adopt this recommendation, or do you want us to neighborhoods and say, hey, we're thinking about this is how you should do it in the future? It's
So what I'm asking this body is to inform a policy that the Department of City Planning will be implementing. As has been my practice for several years now, we bring things to y'all first. When there's going to be a change to something, especially if it affects neighborhoods, we bring it to y'all first. So I'm looking for you to inform the policy. You know, it's different. If it made sense in your MPU to bring that back to the neighborhood, I strongly encourage that because you're representing your MPU by sitting here. So if you want to vote in a way that is informed by their input.
I just don't want to say, I approved something without your consent to change the way you name your neighborhood.
Agreed.
You know, like,
Fully agree. Fully agree. I don't represent my MPU here, but if I did, I would definitely be taking this back to my neighborhoods.
This is the same request for renaming neighborhoods
back to, when we were incorporated in the city of Atlanta.
Does this supersede
This
incorporation?
process, when you require us, as you well know, we have, and whether you and council members, to,
Rename your neighborhood.
it's really not renaming this. It is to get the names of the names that were established at the time that we incorporated into the city to be appear officially or not be considered. And thus, this seems like you might be person that's the this process after many years of us working with the tribal business, working with the county, but I don't think it is. Basically said, please get it done.
So this policy would apply to any neighborhood that is looking to rename their neighborhood. It sounds like you're saying that is not the case for your neighborhood. If that's not, then we probably need to have a different conversation. But
We
the
should
answer,
have this conversation because we've been well aware of this. And I've spoken to you personally on this on many occasions. And so, you should be able to define what I'm actually talking about without me having to.
you know what, they shouldn't be able to, but I'm not.
You
You know what we're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about is
Going the wrong way.
you can, it's established neighborhoods for New York, walking to the city. At one point, and even in some of your
So are you
documents.
saying it's an error? Because that's different.
West Cascade and Midwest Cascade, which was Cleveland County, thing for the area. So we're asking is that you correct the records and put in there the information that was supplied to you.
Yeah, that is very different. Correcting the record is not the same as changing the name of the neighborhood.
Like you basically have. Asked us to wait until this comes into effect, so we can follow this.
So you
process.
can change the name of your neighborhood.
But we're not
But
changing.
it sounds like you're saying you don't need to change the name of the neighborhood. You just need the record to be correct.
And I don't want to, split hairs or get into semantics with you, but this was a request going way back.
I'm so well aware that this request is not
What
new.
do you call?
Point of order, so this sounds like an offline conversation. Probably. Thank you.
I'm happy to have it wherever.
Right, so we have a policy before us, a draft policy recommendation. So if there's a specific question as to whether or not incorporation based upon city lines or is different, but that sounds, but she said that that could be addressed differently, so it wouldn't be addressed in this policy. So we're gonna go on to the question in this.
What's really two questions? What's the timeline for us to get you the recommendations on this training?
Next month, next month's meeting.
And second, my community has really attempted to change its name for the past 15 years or so. And our city council person is, most of this time. Around this, we have, and over 80% of all my LLCs, dummy corporations that lead to try to find, our council to try to help us find, the Fulton County Council Commission problems. To try to find this. I like the fact that now the council reducing that to 25% of the homes as opposed to what we were told it was asking to 75% of tractor property. But one step that I don't see to you is what we were told as the same process was. We will get 75% to change. And we will turn that over to our city council person, turn that over to them. And there's one of the documents that went the property. Then from there, it goes to the city council. You'll see a step in here for, the city council person, they want the city council as a whole. So
Only because that's not the neighborhood's responsibility. The council part, or what happens after the neighborhood submits its application is not the neighborhood's responsibility. But yes, it is absolutely a legislative process.
So, but you have to have, council members involved in this, or against you, or council.
No, you don't have to. I mean, it's wise to make sure your council member is in support of it, because the council member would be the person that we ask to sponsor the legislation. So it makes sense that the council member should be in support.
Ask the question, I was asking. Is your signatures on it? So the past legislation, if there was legislation, or they were told, said that.
Yeah, everybody was swinging it, frankly. From what I could tell, let me throw that out there. From what I could tell, everybody was swinging it. I was able to find a couple of examples where neighborhood names were changed, and we were not able to find a policy on it. Again, it was just kind of done. And we just don't want there to be a situation where somebody like Ms. Phillips, for example, has great influence in the southwest of Atlanta. And southeast, I'm sorry, of Atlanta, and my apologies, different neighbor. And we don't want her to have a great relationship with Councilmember Lewis and just call and be like, I want this neighborhood to be changed to Phillips community. And then the council member, oh, well, he feels pressure for whatever reason, or wants to keep her happy. So he submits the legislation to change the name of the neighborhood, and one person effectively changed the name of the neighborhood. It sounds odd, but it has. So we just want to go around town. So
Doubt like the bear.
All right,
the village.
I would say that I like this petition process. I have other things staged petition process before. The only two things that I would suggest adding to kind of activate is a formal process to remove your name, because the idea is after you have these other things, they're both sides, so to speak, on all sides, you may then want to change your mind. So there should be a period in which you can, if you want to decide to be able to remove your name, and it has to be a cutoff time. And then also, I think that this should have a starting and ending period. There should be a period in which you have to gather all the signatures. And if you do that 25%, then you move on. If you don't, then you start over. Because it shouldn't take, it's in there.
It says within a 6-month period. And I do want to say that the 25%, the 6-month period, and maybe one other thing I can't remember, all of these were put into the policy with a great deal of thought and a great deal of flexibility based on y'all's feedback. Like, this isn't something, the department is not advocating for one way or the other. I started out with 10%. I considered some neighborhood populate, like real neighborhood populations, and thought about what 10% would mean in just us versus 10% in Midtown, trying to figure out what that looks like. And the fear of a situation where 25 people could change the name of a neighborhood. Like, all of that kind of came into play, but it's all subject, all of it is subject to your feedback.
Do you want to say about feedback? Right?
You can, I jotted yours down just now, and I'll jot down as much as I can, but you can certainly send it to me, Ryan.
The last one is that in different, I do this as like a checklist, you do this and then this. At some point that they get someone proposing does not do that requirement, it also needs to be clear that, okay, this petition is not valid. These are free to start over whenever we want, but it needs to be a clear decision made that, okay, with this process, you didn't meet the requirements.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Oh, no, I see everybody's going to.
I had a question about the deed and how that would work, and that could be an answer for later, but who pays for the neighborhood change, or does that have to be included on?
So, it's funny you said that because I saw that in several policy areas, specifically in the city of Atlanta. The code around changing a street name and all of that stuff is on the applicant to change. This is no different. Planning is not gonna pay for y'all to get new signage because you decided to change the name of your neighborhood or anything like that. If you want to change the name of something and it affects your stationery or your neighborhood marker, bigger deal, or your sign toppers, all of that has been on you all along and it will continue to be on you.
That might make people say, okay, I don't pay, whatever.
Everybody's entitled to it on.
Yeah. And so, I'm sorry, but I do want to add that I hope my tone wasn't that this is frivolous, because there are I've gotten some requests to change the name of a neighborhood that were really valid reasons. Like some of them are attached to dark stories or dark people, and they want to change the name of their neighborhood, and it's valid. We just don't have a policy for it. So we've asked them very repeatedly, as Mr. Tuma pointed out, we've asked them to wait, like just hold off since we don't have a policy yet. We plan to do this as part of planning and land together.
Let's go if I may, she mentioned the deeds, and it just did me. The deeds generally have the name of your subdivision, where it was built. So, mine, I know mine says it was about, when you're changing the names of the community, you're changing the name of the subdivision. So then.
No, you're not. No, you're not. No.
Well, we are.
Yeah, you all can do that, but that's probably through a different channel. Like, that's not the city of Atlanta changing the officially recognized name of a neighborhood. That has nothing to do with an HOA or subdivision.
Changing the name of our community.
Okay.
Okay, we have big amounts this way, and they put rebel parts right in the middle. So it should be one name. So we're changing the names of both of those to one name. But the deeds for each of those homes has either Beaver Valley or Rebel Forest. Yes. So that is something that would.
And so what I would clarify is that this process doesn't change the names of your subdivision, and it doesn't change what is on your deed. That is a separate process that you all would have to follow, however you follow that, that's separate. This is just how the city recognizes the name of the neighborhood.
Mr. Will, as I mentioned earlier, everybody's in hands.
Yes, I like the idea of the renaming. Now, how are we preserving the historical area? Like renaming?
So it is somewhat referenced here, I think, somewhere.
It is,
Yeah, under policy scope and exemptions.
like, the story, I said, did not change it.
Not following this policy. I don't know what policy they would follow, but not following this policy.
Extra value is on the table.
This argument is.
Thank you. All right, so, my question, not a question or comment really is, going back to something, Mr. Hunter said about, starting all over again. In a situation similar to, Ms. Phillips, I don't think it would be fair to say, start all over again if you've been trying to reach an entity that owns, tons of property or what have you, for you to start all over again. If you've made valid and reasonable efforts to reach out to them and they have not responded, because we know a lot of these corporations that own properties don't necessarily actively participate. So this policy is different from, say, getting speed bumps installed, for example, or getting a street name changed, because this doesn't require 75% of, or whatever the percentage of homeowners. It's residents. It does not have to be the property owner. It does not exclude renters. This proposed policy as written does not exclude renters. So if you rent a home, you're eligible to sign the petition. We don't have to wait to find the owner of that home. If you live in that home, you're eligible to find the position. Secondly, I think what Mr. Hunter is getting at is just the time period where you're collecting signatures. So ideally, you don't start collecting signatures until you have all your ducks in a row, because you know that there's a clock that's ticking. Ms. Phillips is talking about a process that she's been working on for a while. I don't know whether she made progress on getting petitions signed, but I think maybe I'll say most of the petitions require that you sign it within a time frame. I don't think that's a.
Madam Chair, point of order, we extended. 7 minutes. Or less.
I mean,
How about 17?
We still have new items for your consideration and this is.
lots of people did. And we wait for everybody an opportunity to ask their question. So, can we send, we have a meeting for 1 p.m.
I make a motion to extend the meeting.
Thank you. Any objections? Okay, so now we're gonna spend time doing it in the general.
No, I was kidding. I'm gonna go with, well.
Come on, you've been on it lately now, come on.
I'm telling you today,
Ms. Lee?
What was to say, how do you design neighborhood? And the reason why I'm saying that is, where I live in H, there are like 9 different neighborhood names. And then we have the overall Hamsville name. So if somebody decides they don't want to be called Hamsville anymore because technically it covers 2 different MPUs. Is that possible, or is that too large, or
No.
it's talking about like Boulder Park where I live?
Yes, we're talking about Boulder Park, for example, although interestingly enough, I had a similar conversation probably a year or 2 ago with Mr. Hunter about using his area as an example. In Atlanta, a lot of subdivisions are recognized as neighborhoods. My personal opinion, thank you for asking. I don't really prefer that, frankly. I prefer for your neighborhood to be something that has identity and that you can identify with. And using that as an example, I asked Mr. Hunter, what do the people who live near you say is their neighborhood? Like, what if you ask them where they live, what are they gonna say? They're not gonna say such and such subdivision or that subdivision or whatever. They're gonna say Ben Hill. Like, that's what's known to people. And some NPUs have 29, 20, whatever neighborhoods that are really subdivisions. They're not real, actual, well, I shouldn't say real. They're not neighborhoods. They're using a classic definition of what a neighborhood is. They don't have a neighborhood center. They don't, it's not a neighborhood. It's literally a subdivision. So this policy does not contemplate that at all. This policy is for changing the officially recognized name of an officially recognized neighborhood, not an area or something like that.
Right, let's go back to the back.
Yeah, you and I have had this conversation before. I don't think we want to get into these. Today, I would like to find out the notion of an officially recognized neighborhood association is ill-defined if it is defined at all. And
Not association or neighborhood.
no,
Well, you're talking about for the letter of
policy,
support,
they're going to look for support from an officially recognized neighborhood association.
if applicable, yes. It's what it is. It should. I believe it does. Okay. Great. It's, neighborhood association says if applicable, but really it's, they all should say if applicable, and we can add that because not every neighborhood has an association. We definitely know that, yeah.
And not all of these.
So we definitely know that.
Any sort of official recognition.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm with this.
Like that.
If you believe, but since we all are, when our neighborhood was considering historic designation, the councilman said, I was not carrying this. 2/3 overwhelming popular support. 2/3 are engaged, not 2/3 of the property owners or land That might be something to consider. You cannot make everyone be engaged. If you giving you that 25%. You know, whoever shows up, we got hundreds of people that never showed up before. And they're not supporting the story. That's just something to consider.
Yes. When I first came to my neighborhood, Ferguson, I wondered why Ferguson Park was still in the hill. And I then found out when I was in here, someone called me up to the mountain. I would become involved. I said, well, what neighborhood? They said Ferguson. I said, what address? The address they gave me was Sylvan Hills. I said, no, that's Sylvan Snow. My deed and the fact says Ferguson. So I was wondering, how did you stick your guns research on others? And I was wondering, how could I research that history of how that change came?
It's a new story for me.
Okay.
I think the sheriff has just a place we can. Lakewood Heights, we have two communities. When you see the boundaries of Lakewood Heights, it includes Park Place South and Pickfair. Pickfair, Park Place South, per se, they don't belong to Lakewood Heights. That they're separate communities, although the city map shows what's the issue there. We all have to go to NPY, but nonetheless, because of blah, blah, blah. So what's the issue there? I don't know what the issue is. The first time hearing the question. No, not so much. They're considered the Virginia Highlands of Lakewood Heights. I live out 2 streets, et cetera. So
Virginia Highlands.
well, no, in that the income levels, the newness of the house, the size of the house. But they disavow the constituents in Lakewood Heights. Whereas when we look at the city map, both Park Place South as well as Pickfair, which is only 2 streets. So the issue, so I guess the question is, if they're part of Lakewood Heights, how can they separate themselves?
Isn't that going to the subdivision issue that you talked about?
It's not a subdivision issue, but if they are not, Pickfair is not a city of Atlanta neighborhood. And I don't know what the other one is that you said.
It's in Lakewood Heights.
Lakewood Heights is the neighborhood.
Okay.
Pickfair is a community. But Pickfair is not recognized as the city of Atlanta neighborhood. At least it's not on any list that I'm looking at. I can tell you that.
Because I'm telling my bylaw committee they can't list them as a one of the 10 communities that
They sure can if they want to.
they can't.
That's not related to this.
I'm not worried about that issue. I just thought I'd ask to see those.
No, just please let me know if you have any input on this. Oh, Miss Lee Furlow did have a question when she was in her car. What is the impact of the, we answered the historical neighborhoods question, detection of new landmark education. Council members are aware of the policy. No, this is an administrative policy. So we do hope at some point to codify some of the things that we talk about here as a part of planning and setting again. That's not gonna happen in the dark. I will know already well in advance of that. And that's no time, so probably another year or so. I'm not sure I understand the rest of the question though.
So it was kind of too hard. When I first saw this, my concern was, why would anyone want to change a neighborhood? I see the why has presented, I guess the verbiage when it says their neighborhood identity has evolved. I didn't know if that an insult or not. You know, because my community has evolved, but now that it has evolved, that means I want to make something more. Is it going to be a reflection of some people that finally decided to identify as something newly approved? So that is kind of, you know, because I'm in a historic neighborhood, you know, I know that's going to be a serious conversation, you know.
Yeah, the hopefully not too serious, because I don't think this is touching that at all. The one place that I think should be considered the most is the number of people required to sign the petition. I think that it's important that y'all think about that, and that you inform what the policy becomes. The other thing is that as policy, not code right now, it will be policy, not code. It can be changed based on feedback. If somebody is trying it out and realizes that, you know, hey, they changed it to 75% is impossible or it's too cumbersome or you can't do it in 6 months, then we can take a look at that and change that as well. As far as the neighborhood identity evolving, that really speaks more to, well, first of all, neighborhood identities do evolve. They can evolve. And if the majority of a community or whatever percentage we settle on decides that this neighborhood should be XYZ, they can follow all of the actions. It still hinges on the council member signing off on it by introducing the legislation, but they can follow those actions. What I can tell you, using it as an example, I've never seen a community say, literally never, not that that means much, but I've never seen a community say, well, we now have this, that, the other, so we should change our name to be something else. That I've not seen. What I have seen is we are now more conscious of our neighborhood's history and we want to change the name so that it doesn't reflect this bad person that our community is named after. Or this person that whose perspective or worldview we don't agree with, so we want to change it. A really good example that comes to mind immediately, and it's in my neck of the woods, so I kind of feel like I have a point of privilege to say it. Dixie Hills in 2020 wanted to change the name of their neighborhood from Dixie Hills to Historic Hills, I think, or Hidden Hills or something. Historic Hills, thank you. Incidentally, most people would think that that's a no-brainer, like Dixie Hills, who wants to be in a neighborhood named Dixie Hills? Like, yes, duh, let's change it. Surprisingly, the residents didn't want to change it. And it didn't get changed because the residents were not. It was a surprise to the people leading the effort. Same thing with Mosley Park. Surprise to the people leading the effort, but the neighbors didn't want to change it. And honestly, that's our only interest in this, is knowing that the neighbors want to change it. We don't want to change it because Mr. Schlupner decides that now you've got a high rise here and a Target there, so we should change the name because it's fancy now, or something like that. We don't want that. We want it to be driven by the people.
Yes, and there's the expectation that, upon explanation of why. And I know that that's deeper in, or should be, deeper in this policy presentation. That it could be to want to change DC because DC is representative of this particular period of time. And so that no longer reflects what we are and who we are in the community. So I'll just delve into it a little bit more. And I think the other piece of what I was saying was this new generation of folks that may be coming in and saying, you know, now that we've come in and we made some improvements, we no longer want this to be as, you know, we like to call it a dare of the north side. So that's my concern, just ensuring that there is the opportunity for presentations to the neighbors. And then there was a thought that, you know, I'm renting here. So if I'm renting, I may not have as much skin in the game as somebody that is a legacy resident. So I can kind of see some of that. I'm sorry.
Our next minutes at 1 o'clock, it's 12:40. Are going to on have any other further recommendations for each of those to Ms. LaRue? Call, text, email, you know how to get in touch with her, all of them have on a regular basis.
Thank you all for your time.
Madam Chair, I was going to ask that it's appropriate that also time and space in the policy committee to table and have conversations.
I appreciate that.
Discuss that.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
And if I may, while you go into the next thing, I will look into, I hate that Mr. Toomer had to leave. I didn't get a chance to clarify, but I'll review he is absolutely right about the years of conversation we've had on his neighborhood. I will review that and get back to him. I'm not aware of it being a criminal's error or whatever was being described. I was under the impression that it was a neighborhood renaming or name change.
I know, we were.
I love Mr. Cooper.
I just thought that was.
Party game.
I know. And
That's storm out.
Let's keep on moving. So our standing committee report, those are written. We are not gonna mobilize those. We don't have anything, any motions coming out of committee. Governance committee, yes, ma'am. Oh, governance committee. I was gonna say, okay. Governance committee, did make some recommendations for our 2025 priorities. What we would like to ask the group is that for our March meeting is actually dedicated as a work session so that we can hammer these out. Not any sort of strategic planning, all day session. It would be a regular meeting, work session where we would actually finalize our priorities for this year. And we have people to go forward. That's the recommendation. So I guess, is there a motion on that recommendation?
So
Second, Madam Chair. Is there any discussion? Didn't know where the recommendation was. Okay, never mind. We need to move it along. So the recommendation of our governance is to have a dedicated strategic planning work session.
so no restrictions.
On in our March meeting to, determine and finalize our 2025 priorities. That's the recommendation out of governance. So I'm asking for a motion.
Make a motion that we expect to, have the March meeting as a working session.
For executive meeting for, that was seconded by Hunter.
Any discussion?
Any discussion on the matter?
Sorry, look at it in this. Something going on. But I just asked, because I didn't get time to test, they coincided, right?
Okay, they don't. So,
We were.
yeah. Any other discussion on the matter? This is not, our meeting date does not coincide with the neighborhood summit.
Okay. Are we using the same room or is it no different days? Or in session? It's gonna be virtual or in person?
It's still gonna be a regular. It's still a meeting. It's still a meeting.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the governance.
No, the motion is to make the March meeting of APAB a work session on the 2025 agenda.
With all that.
So when you come to your March meeting, you'll be having a work session on your 2025 agenda. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. But all of that comes out of our meeting, the governance.
We're in discussion, it's a discussion of, so I'm trying to bring us back to the actual motion. Are there any other questions on the motion? Are there any objections on the motion? Thank you, approved by unanimous consent. On to elections, Ms. LaRue.
For the order,
That's not, sir.
this we have a item consideration of the.
Oh, that's right.
No, I apologize, I didn't bring a copy of the article in HEC, but it concerned me, I had mentioned this before, that we had not had a report, from that commission since, Sharon Williams had to step down because she is, had served her time. Right, and it concerns me because of the fact that I thought that this was a good avenue for people who had issues with recent parenting. And that, they could be, resolved through discussion and like it. I was just interested in knowing what's going on, why aren't they considering, cases for those people who are representing us?
So we have had several people attend, and give out ACR reports, to this body. And we have discussed the governance committee having, Director Reed give us a presentation on, the current meetings at ACRP. So I can get back to you about that, and what we can do at this point is refer your request to governance committee so that we can, so we can figure out how we can get that information to the body. Okay, and then we also have, one of our representatives, we have,
I can give you a brief synopsis, but I think it would be a better idea to have Mr. Lee come in and give the details. The article is rife with misinformation. The particular cases that they bring up they're not represented the right way. What she misrepresents is that there is a process for reviewing particularly officer-involved shootings. And if the Atlanta Police Department does not close the case, as Mr. Donald mentioned earlier, we don't get it. We can't start an investigation until they do that. And most of those cases, if they're not still open, APD misrepresented whether they were closed or not. As an example, one of the officer-involved shootings was closed by APD 2.5 years ago, but they keep telling us that it's pending, so we can't move on.
We also add that on the 24th, Mr. Director will be appearing for the Public Safety Committee, and it is under the mandate that an explanation be given that will rebut or that will rebut this article, I guess I would put it.
And I want to be clear about one more thing. This is particularly officer-involved shooting type incidences. Anything else is brought to the board by a citizen initiated complaint is reviewed as quickly as our team can investigate it.
Mr. Hunter.
I would say that the APAB rep that we've appointed for our interviews writes us monthly, it sends us written updates, which included, Dr. Fed. So she sent us a report from the executive director of the trustees. So I can, for that, share with all the chairs.
All of them, all of the communities should be receiving their rep. All the entities are covered before that. Each rep should be submitting these report.
Mr. Hunter.
I was gonna mention the same thing, Dr. Stalvey, so I do have a copy of the Secretary's report. I can send it to the planning so that I can share it amongst some people. I think that is a response. I still think that there is some things that we should do, and I would even consider, but for suggest that maybe we should have delegation for a few of us go attend the meeting, because it is not publicly viewed or accessible. And it should probably get the actual tag of the minutes, they're live. They don't stream. So I can get them.
Partly okay, my acronym. Now, so where I was going was, I believe it's always held during the time of one of the zoning meetings.
That's true.
It's held, so that is a major.
Thursday of the month, that's true.
Yes, because I know it's like, go here or go there. You know, I gotta go to the zoning.
That's true. But I think someone just raised the question of those being recorded. I understand most base organizations like us are recorded, and I think that's the question that's come here, so.
I would just remind, if I may, that this board we can make, I know y'all know this, but maybe you need to hear me say it, this board can make recommendations to anybody at the city of Atlanta. And the people who represent APAB on the ACRD are board members, the same voice you have in this room about APAB, have in that room about ACRD, and can and should be making recommendations around things within the bylaws, of course, should be making recommendations around things that concern you or that do not best represent the voice of the residents of Atlanta.
Excuse
All
me.
right.
Sorry, really quick.
So we have 10 minutes left and people have hard stops and we still have an agenda. So this is being referred to committee, so we can actually discuss that further there. Sorry, Mr.
Which
Chairman.
committee is this referred to?
My notes. As since it's to governance, but it actually makes you think the quality of life. All right, let's move on to election. I mean, it's just moving on to departments and branches.
So there has been, discussion on whether or not your election policy allows nominations from the floor. We did take nominations last month. Those nominations were Segura Jones for president, running unopposed. There were no other nominations for that. And Rebecca King representing NPB and Kyle Kessler representing NPM for vice chair. There were no other nominations for that. I don't know if y'all want to take nominations from the floor. I'm seeing no. I don't want to make that decision. And I did not have definitive documentation one way or the other. So if there are to be no nominations from the floor, we can go ahead and get you your ballot and let you vote.
So, if there's a discussion for that, I was in the room and we discussed because of the number of officers, that we didn't need nominations before because we are required to have. Right here. At least we didn't, and that was discussed with our around the nations. So, I guess my question is, if we don't get the nominations before, will the ballot have a right to selection polls?
I'm sorry. I heard the whole thing except the part where it looks like there was a question, but it
So-
sounded like.
The reason why we did not do nominations before is only
Right.
part of it is because the right, we don't need vote.
Right.
It's vote decided. Luke's there, Lori and Kyle, and the board has changed, but that was why, and that's in the current, the new bylaws.
Yeah, that should not have been sent to y'all. That's why it hopefully doesn't work now if you try to. It doesn't. Okay, good. Yeah, the first thing that you received, you should not have received. So.
I mean, that's
Nobody's in trouble.
so that's why it was that way.
Necessarily.
Two offices,
It's good.
so,
So we like it up.
but it's not like you said. I guess what I'm saying is that if we took nominations before, it's my thing would be a violation of bylaws.
So you're not taking nominations from the floor. Let's, y'all ready to go? We are.
And, you know, it's not why you asked this one. I thought you confused the.
I mean, it was one of those meetings, I'm sorry, but.
I know everybody's tired. It's been a long day. I appreciate it before the order. Let's go.
Yeah, but last month Rebecca was not here, but each candidate was asked if they said. Okay, you got this. So for future reference, I think that should be ready to take a record.
Yes. Are y'all ready to vote?
Given any presentation.
Yes, you have the items, right?
Yeah.
In front of you?
Yeah.
And so we're giving everybody 60 seconds or so to.
Wait a minute, so we're not gonna do the part,
What part?
talk to the candidate?
That's what we're about to do. Hunter.
Sir.
Y'all have 5 minutes left in your meeting, unless somebody's extending. I didn't hear anybody motion to extend.
No.
That's wrong.
I don't care. No, I don't.
There we go.
No, I'm sorry. I'm losing it.
Are y'all ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so you have, your president is running unopposed. She is not really capable of doing much talking. But if anybody has questions for your president, I'm sure she'll be happy to answer those questions.
I'll read her bio.
Everybody has their bio. Has the bio. Any questions for the president? No? Okay, lovely. Next up for your vice president candidates, you have Rebecca King from NPC and Kyle Kessler from NPM. You have both of their bios in your packet. Rebecca, would you take 30 seconds to tell the board why you want to be vice chair?
Want to steer
Vice president, it's right there.
Okay. Hello, I'm Rebecca King. While I'm a newbie to the the APAB system, I am a past chair. I do have a lot of experience in board work, some recommendations that I would like to present, whether I am nominated or not. Still, I think this would be great with the vice president, since it almost aligns with our duties and responsibilities. Just oversees the board succession planning. I would like to see us have APAB emails for our NPU, so that also we could have a hub of information where documents are shared and we're not receiving multiple emails and things here and there. We would know to go back and look at that. I would also like to recommend that the vice president should set up meetings with the NPU chairs. You don't have to meet, but if there are ordinance or items that the NPUs would like to discuss, the chairs, and to also hear everybody's thought process. One thing that came to mind was the signed ordinance and who had it, who didn't, and just have a more cohesive conversation among the chairs monthly, but not necessary if people choose not to meet. Those were the basic things that I could think of. Also, we asked Mayor Andre Dickens about a community calendar. We have an APAB calendar and an MPU calendar. I would like to propose to the city or whomever that we start putting these items on those calendars so that we don't have conflicts where we have neighborhood, governance committee, many multiple items are overlapping each other and we're scrambling to get there ourselves and find someone to get there. Would you like me to take questions, or I guess that's
does anyone have any questions for Ms. King? Actually, no, we don't want to do it that way. Mr. Kessler.
Obviously, NPUM, I wanted to be nominated and happy to serve at the body of the body and so choose watches reflects the will of the body and the direction of our presumed given them not yet elected president. They've been involved in the life years. I think Rebecca King's ideas are great. I think recommendations from the governance committee will be discussed next month in Brit as well. And it's ever folks who want to see those things or anything else done. 100% ideas, but maybe we should want to reflect the will of the body and the direction of our elected president. Serve and support her since as we are all volunteers, we have limited capacity. So just wanted to make sure that at the top we have someone who can sit in if someone's feeling ill and not able to fulfill their obligations. So want to make sure that she's, or whomever we have to elect this bill is support that.
Any questions for your hearing none? You should have or be getting the ballot via text message momentarily. If you do not get the ballot, please just catch my eye and we'll give you a paper ballot. But is it sent to text and email?
Just text.
Just text, okay. So just text based on the phone number that we have for you. If you don't, not the old one, disregard, act like you didn't get the old one. So if you, disregard that. There should be one coming in like now, 1 o'clock, it's 12:58, 9, 1 o'clock. Something like that. Second.
Second on the part of questions and the second, our president is done. They want more, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Flowers.
Secretary. It doesn't come instantly, so it'll take a second, and it depends on your carrier. Some people will get it first and others. So give it maybe, 3 or 4 more minutes.
It's possible.
Mhm.
Much and possible.
Yes.
I'll be extended for 5 minutes.
And it won't take a couple seconds.
For those of us who are recently certain that you don't actually have our cell phone numbers.
I'll give you a paper ballot.
Okay. I can wait.
But here's a great reason to make sure we do have your cell phone number.
I'm just saying that what has happened to me in the past is that somebody has said, oh, I sent it to, and then they'll either list my landline or my office number.
I need it now. Maybe you have my number, but I haven't got it. That's okay, just wait until you get it.
We have your, if you have voted by election money here before, then we probably have your cell already. I remember we had issues with Miss Lee last year.
And also the way that I communicate with y'all to remind you and get your attendance confirmation. So those are the numbers that we do have on file and the ones that we will be sending the ballots to. Never responded.
I never responded to your text message because you never sent me a text message because you never know what text.
Yeah, I probably was.
So here.
Yes.
Thank you.
I bet you.
It's a catch 22. You keep sending me text messages asking for my cell phone number and you don't get it because I don't get that.
Yeah, that's not a good way. Actually, as evidence by it is say you have here. So that could be right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, the number that we have for you is
Sorry, I'm,
Mark. 043516949.
That's my home number. It's a landline.
Okay.
It won't be ringing right now, but it's not getting a text message. I can guarantee that.
The organization.
I can't give you my cell phone number.
So if or not,
That sounds very conditional.
your chair is not responding. Make sure we're able to have some representation. For your business association as an event Saturday, at CCI's office, about 460 Avenue.
It's the best way to get in touch with them. 9 times out of 10, my cell phone is sitting in a drawer with a dead battery. So,
No, that's.
just need a big
But there will be a celebration by Mr. Ben Howard this coming Tuesday, February 18th, 3 p.m. at the National Aviation Museum Shopping Center. That's over there near the Fulton County area. My first time around here 7+ years ago, he was a monument, something from what APAB, he's always here. I mean, some things going on with him, I can say how he wanted to, but he showed up, took over everything. And yes, and so, and I actually spoke to him, at the meeting right before he passed away, so, those who want to celebrate, honor him, that will give them that Tuesday.
Thanks for the chocolate.
That's the signs. That's the signs.
Thank you.
That's 2 times in a row. Now.
Wait for the party. Wait for the fun. Okay.
Still didn't bring you. Seven 803 619 668. Big broadcaster.
Let the right person call. I mean, I get texts from, things all the time.
Is there anybody else that did not get to vote? Like, must have voted here. there anybody else that didn't have to vote? Sorry, so everybody else.
Wow, Kessler, Wow, Jones.
It's supposed to be anonymous. I need to know how many people, that's all, and I need to make sure that I don't get paper from somebody that, don't give me no serious saying, oh.
She's going to remind her.
The drum roll. Everybody? Yeah. Mr. Parliamentary, you have the box on the screen. Yeah, okay, the box is perfect. To everyone's surprise, your president for 2025 is actually a year ago. Did I saying anything? Oh my gosh, you're gonna close. Hold on, let me just double check this.
Do the math, you know, he's got to say plus one.
Oh my.
That was reading.
I have two vice chairs.
No.
And that was Kyle's fault.
Inflation.
So, Vice President. Kessler received 9 votes. Rebecca King received 10 votes. Vice President is Rebecca King.
Well, you're right. Did you get a recount?
Yeah, I'm gonna recount. The word it happened, you're right.
Congratulations. You're the backwards parts are getting a little wild. I'm like, she's ready.
Motion to adjourn.
No, actually, then it's kind of a reason.
Oh, sign up.
Well,
Sign up for your community link if you haven't already.
Wait now, you missed one, yeah.
Over here, she was pointing to me.
I like hit the ground running. Let's go.
Do we have a motion?
She's trying to make one.
Motion to adjourn?
So I turned this also with this organization.
It was my name.
On the back one.
Wait a minute, please. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Do we need a second?
Ms. Burton, second.
Ms. Harden, second. And then, any objections? None presented. We shall adjourn.
All right.
Oh, please.